Elder Pines, summer 1996. The sun had just begun to dip behind the jagged outline of the mountains when Emily Foster zipped up her backpack and tied the red bandana around her wrist. It had been a hot day, but now the breeze rolled cool off the treetops, whispering through the cracks of open windows and creaky porches in the little town of Elder Pines. Emily was 11, almost 12, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone older. Her parents thought she was asleep. So did Marcus's. And Zoe's were away for the weekend. That was the plan. At the end of Birch Street, Marcus Bell, 12 and taller than most kids in their class, stood waiting near the stop sign with his bike. He wore his usual cargo shorts, a Walkman clipped to his belt, and had packed 3 granola bars like he was going to war. He kept glancing down the street for signs of movement. "Late," he mumbled, adjusting his backpack strap. From around the corner came Zoe Lang, always last, always breathless. She had a head full of frizzy curls and a notebook clutched tightly in one hand. "Sorry," she panted. "My grandma was on the porch forever." "Let's go," Emily said, "before someone sees." They didn't tell anyone, not even Zoe's little brother, who begged to come. This wasn't a regular ride. Tonight was about the fire lookout. They had heard about the lookout from an old hiker in town, a wooden tower built in the 1940s, once used to scan for forest fires, now abandoned, deep in the woods above Deer Hollow Trail. Half the kids at Elder Pines Middle School said it didn't exist. The other half said it was haunted. So obviously, they had to go. Halfway up the trail, Emily stopped and took a Polaroid photo. The 3 of them in a line, headlamps on, grinning like idiots. Zoe insisted on holding the camera. "In case we die tragically," she joked. Marcus rolled his eyes. "You watch too many movies." But there was something about that moment, the quiet of the woods, the way the trees leaned over the trail like they were listening. The air smelled sharp, like pine sap and damp soil. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Zoe pulled out her notebook, flipped to a page with a sketch of the tower, and whispered, "Almost there." The next morning, a ranger found the bikes leaning against the Deer Hollow trailhead. 3 helmets still hanging on the handlebars. But no footprints, no kids, no tower either. Just a Polaroid photo, half torn, caught in the branches of a pine tree near the ridge. Only 2 faces were visible. In the weeks that followed, Elder Pines became a town under siege. Search teams, bloodhounds, helicopters, psychics, volunteers, TV cameras. They found nothing. Then on the 14th day, a hiker discovered a single torn page from Zoe's notebook near an old bear trap. The page read, "He said not all of us will come back. I thought he was kidding." The families never gave up, not really. But as the years passed, the posters faded. The forest grew back. The lookout was declared an urban legend. And the 3 names, Emily Foster, Marcus Bell, Zoe Lang, slowly became a ghost story. But in 2025, long after most people had forgotten, the mountain remembered. And it would speak again. Elder Pines, summer 2025. The new owners of the Garrison farmstead had no idea what lay beneath the barn when they hired a construction team to clear out the old root cellar. The property, abandoned for decades, sat on the edge of town, a forgotten sliver of land where blackberry vines ran wild and mountain winds whistled through the cracked wood like ghost song. It was mid-morning when the jackhammer hit stone, then wood, then something that gave way with a dull, unnatural thunk. At first, they thought it was just a collapsed support beam, but when Terrell Hayes, the foreman, pulled away the planks, he found something else. A shoe, tiny, molded with age, a child's. They stopped everything. The police arrived by noon. Sheriff Dana Rosser, who had once played hopscotch with Emily Foster in the schoolyard, stood silently as the forensic team gently pulled up the earth, layer by layer. The root cellar had been sealed shut decades ago, but something had been buried within it. Or someone. By sunset, the team had unearthed 2 skeletons. One was clearly male, based on the pelvis shape and skull size. The other, female, smaller, with a rusted necklace still clinging to the clavicle like a question mark. But the most chilling detail wasn't the bones. It was the writing on the wall, scratched roughly into the stone behind where the bodies lay, scrawled with what looked like a rusted nail or key. One ran, one died, one remembered. And beneath it, the faint outline of a triangle with 3 initials inside. E, F, M, B, Z, L. The town of Elder Pines was jolted awake. Everyone knew those initials. Everyone remembered the case that haunted their childhood. But that case had no ending. Until now. Sheriff Rosser sat in her truck outside the barn, holding the Polaroid photo that had been found back in 1996. The one missing Emily's face. Now, with forensic work underway, it wouldn't take long to confirm what most already feared. But what no one expected was what happened 3 days later. A hospital in Flagstaff, Arizona, submitted a call to the FBI. We have a woman who walked into our ER, disoriented and dehydrated, claiming she was born in 1985 in Elder Pines. She says her name is Emily Foster, and she says she remembers everything. That night, Sheriff Rosser drove back out to the trailhead at Deer Hollow. She stood beside the rusted sign, half-eaten by moss, and whispered to the woods, "Which one of you came back?" Flagstaff, Arizona. July 2025. The woman in room 412 didn't look like someone lost in the woods. Her hair was matted but clean, her eyes sharp, though clouded with confusion. She spoke in complete sentences, but hesitated before every answer, like she was flipping through a dusty filing cabinet in her mind. She called herself Emily Foster. She said she was 11 years old. She didn't know what year it was. And she asked for her mother. Sheriff Dana Rosser stared at the woman through the glass, heart thudding in her chest. The girl on the other side of that window looked 35, pale, thin, worn by sun and time. But her eyes were the same pale green she remembered from the schoolyard, bright and watchful. She stepped into the room slowly. "Emily?" Dana asked, voice soft. The woman blinked. "You look older?" Dana choked back emotion. "So do you." The initial interview was surreal. Emily knew things no one else would. Details buried in time. The name of Zoe's dog. The way Marcus used to hum under his breath when he was nervous. The exact wording on the missing person flyer her mother had taped to every grocery store window in 1996. But her timeline didn't make sense. She claimed they never reached the fire lookout, that the trail split unexpectedly, and they followed a man in a ranger's uniform who promised there was a shortcut. She said he smelled like kerosene and peppermint. Then there was a cabin, a dark place, a basement, a room with no clocks. She said they were kept apart, and that she saw Marcus once, but he had been crying, and Zoe never spoke again. Then something happened, something she couldn't explain. "I fell asleep," she said, "and when I woke up, it was today." The doctors called it trauma-induced dissociation, a coping mechanism. They said it was likely she escaped early on, blocked out the truth, and lived off the grid, drifting under false names. Maybe she had been taken in by someone who never reported it. Maybe she invented the story to protect herself. But Sheriff Rosser wasn't convinced. There were too many small truths in Emily's answers. Too many gaps that didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded raw, like a child whose memories had been stuffed into a box for too long. Back in Elder Pines, news spread fast. The story made the local paper, then the state news, then national headlines. Missing girl from 1996 found alive in Arizona. DNA confirms identity of Emily Foster. 2 bodies found linked to her case. Vanished at 11, found at 41. What happened to Emily Foster? But behind the headlines, something quieter stirred. People in town remembered the Foster family, remembered how quickly they moved away after the 3rd year of failed searches. remembered how Emily's mother, Judith, refused to take down her bedroom. Now Judith sat on her porch, staring at the blank TV screen, whispering, "I knew she wasn't dead. I felt it in my teeth." But not everyone was so sure. One of the original rangers who'd searched the Deer Hollow Trail, Paul Trevors, now in his 60s, told a local reporter, "That girl, she was gone. No footprints, no trace. If she came back, she didn't come back the same." And at Marcus Bell's memorial, where a candle still sat untouched each year on the date he vanished, someone had carved a new line into the bench nearby. She was found, but what did she leave behind? Back at the hospital, a therapist named Dr. Anna Reyes tried to guide Emily through her memory. But it wasn't working. The memories came in flashes, never in order. She'd draw sketches of mountains, of tunnels, of a cracked mirror, and a spiral symbol that made her cry when she saw it. And then, one night, she whispered, "There were more." Dr. Reyes frowned. "More what?" Emily didn't blink. "More children. I think we weren't the first." Elder Pines, July 2025. The sky above Elder Pines held that eerie stillness that comes before a storm, not of weather, but of reckoning. Sheriff Dana Rosser stood beside Emily Foster on the overgrown trail that once led to the Fire Lookout Tower. Emily wore borrowed hiking boots and a pale windbreaker, but her eyes weren't focused on the trail ahead. They were fixed on the spaces between things, the shadows where the trees leaned too close, where the moss crept too thickly over the stones. The media had been kept at bay for now, held behind cordons and press briefings. But the town watched from porches and windows as Emily returned to the place she'd last been seen 29 years ago. She said she remembered something hidden, something beneath the ground. The search team followed slowly, skeptical and quiet. Emily walked ahead with a strange certainty, as if she wasn't remembering, but reliving. Her hand brushed the tree bark as she whispered, "It was here. I know it was here." She stopped at a flat patch of earth, near a fork in the trail that no longer looked like a trail at all. A moss-covered log lay broken across it, but Emily stepped over without hesitation. "Right here," she said. The ground beneath her was soft, not like dirt, but like covering. Sheriff Rosser gave a silent nod. Within minutes, the team had their shovels. They dug for hours. It was just before dusk when they hit concrete. A slab, old and cracked, covered with layers of compacted soil and stone. At its center was a metal handle, rusted nearly to powder. It took 2 crowbars and an hour of effort before it creaked open. The air that spilled out was thick with mildew, and something worse, the stale chemical rot of a place that had never been meant to breathe. The opening revealed a narrow staircase, carved from stone and descending into darkness. No one spoke. Sheriff Rosser called for backup. By nightfall, the forensic team, a federal FBI liaison, and a small hazmat unit stood at the edge of the entrance. Cameras were lowered first. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A room, small, windowless, lined with drawings. They were crude, childlike, done in charcoal, ash, and what appeared to be old lipstick. Spirals, triangles, stick figures with X's over their eyes. And one chilling image, 3 children holding hands, standing in a forest, with one drawn upside down, feet in the air. In the corner of the room sat a small cot, rusted and bare, and on it a single red backpack, faded, brittle with time. Emily whispered, "That was mine." What followed over the next week shook Elder Pines to its core. The basement room, dubbed the Spiral Chamber by investigators, was dated back to pre-1960s, with no known building permits or records. DNA found inside confirmed that Emily, Zoe, and Marcus had all been inside. But more disturbing were the other samples, partial profiles of at least 4 additional children, none of whom matched any missing persons reports on record. And then came the most disturbing find of all. Behind a false wall, they discovered a second chamber. It was smaller, empty except for a metal table with leather straps bolted into it. Carved into the cement wall above it, in precise block letters, "The first three spoke, the last three obeyed." The FBI now believed the site to be part of a pattern of abductions going back decades, possibly generations, hidden, cyclical. But how had it gone unnoticed? How had no one ever seen the signs? And how had Emily survived? That night, back in her temporary safe house, Emily sat with Dr. Reyes, her hands trembling around a cup of tea. "I don't remember the second room," she said. "But you remembered where it was." Emily nodded slowly. "I think someone whispered it to me, in my sleep." Dr. Reyes leaned forward. "Someone who was with you?" Emily stared at her. "Someone who never left." Meanwhile, Sheriff Rosser reviewed old records in the town archives. Births, adoptions, foster placements. Children who appeared briefly in school logs, then vanished. And in one file from 1978, she found a name scrawled hastily at the bottom of a withdrawal slip. Zane Linden, transferred to regional boarding. The same initials Emily had scratched in her journal. ZL. Zane Linden had vanished 18 years before Emily did. He was never reported missing. But a week later, a campfire burned down a ranger's cabin near Elder Pines. The only thing found in the ashes was a melted ranger badge and a spiral drawn in soot on the cabin door. Elder Pines, August 2025. The morning light in Elder Pines was sharp and clear, but it did nothing to dispel the dread that had settled over the town like fog. Since the discovery of the spiral chamber, the town had become both a crime scene and a spectacle. Journalists circled like vultures. Every local had a theory, and Emily Foster was now the center of it all, a woman both lost and found, survivor and witness. But Emily wasn't focused on the outside world. Something had shifted in her. She no longer woke screaming. She no longer asked why. Now she asked where. Where were the others? Where were the voices coming from? And why was someone still leaving her signs? It began with the note, slipped beneath the door of her temporary safe house at the edge of town. It was a small square of yellowed paper torn from an old notebook. On it was a single symbol, plus. No signature, no writing, just the symbol. Sheriff Rosser dismissed it as a prank. Dr. Reyes called it a stress hallucination. But Emily knew. She'd seen it before. On the wall of the spiral chamber, just once, faint and half erased. She remembered touching it with her finger as a child, wondering why it made her stomach twist. 3 days later, she found the second message, this time in the woods. She'd insisted on walking the perimeter trail with Officer Juno, a younger deputy assigned to her for protection. Near the creek bend, behind a broken log, something glinted in the sunlight. A mirror shard half buried, etched into the glass, scratched by a blade or nail. Not all bones sleep. Juno thought it might be graffiti from teenagers. Emily said nothing. But that night, she dreamed of the fire lookout tower. The old one, the version that had burned down in 1997. She was climbing its steps, barefoot, each step carved with a different word. She reached the top and looked out over a forest where the trees had no shadows. And someone behind her whispered, "You weren't supposed to leave." The FBI had requested Emily undergo more in-depth hypnosis, but Dr. Reyes resisted. "She's starting to remember naturally," she told them. "Rushing this will shatter her progress." But privately, even Reyes was unnerved. Emily's memories weren't returning in fragments. They were returning as symbols, codes, drawings, as if her mind had learned to protect her with metaphor. And each metaphor pointed to the same truth. Someone else had survived, and someone else was watching. Meanwhile, Sheriff Rosser had begun pulling missing child reports from surrounding towns. A pattern was emerging, one the FBI hadn't fully seen yet. Every 11 years, a trio of disappearances. Always around wooded areas. Always children or teens. But the 1996 trio, Emily, Zoe, and Marcus, were the only ones where a survivor reappeared. It suggested one thing. Emily wasn't just a victim. She was the variable that broke the pattern. Back at the station, a local hunter came in with a game camera from deep in the woods, east of Elder Pines, near the old rail line, long since abandoned. He'd found it knocked over, battery drained, memory cards still intact. Most of the images were grainy deer and tree movement. But one image made Sheriff Rosser's stomach tighten. A blurry figure walking between trees. Hunched. Tall, wearing what looked like a ranger's coat. But its face was covered in a white cloth mask tied behind the head, and painted on the mask in black marker, a spiral. The timestamp, 2 nights ago. Emily hadn't left her safe house that night, and yet, when Officer Juno reviewed the indoor surveillance footage, there was a 7-minute blackout. Inexplicable. No weather interference, no glitches, just static. And when the feed returned, Emily was asleep on the couch. But something was different. The red backpack, the one recovered from the spiral chamber and kept in storage, was now placed beside her feet. She woke to find it there, unzipped. Inside was a single item that hadn't been logged before, a cassette tape labeled in faded red ink. ZL, whisper code, numero 3. Emily's hands shook as she lifted it. She hadn't seen a tape player in decades, but she knew what it was. And she whispered almost reverently, "He kept the voices. He told us to forget. But the tapes remember." That night, Sheriff Rosser called a late meeting with the FBI liaison and Dr. Reyes. "I think we've been wrong about this from the beginning," she said. "This wasn't just abduction. This was conditioning, something ritualistic, repeated, designed." Dr. Reyes asked, "Then why Emily?" Rosser stared at the photograph pinned to the board, the blurry masked figure in the woods. "Because she broke the pattern, and now I think someone wants to make sure she never remembers how." The cassette was old, its label smudged, its plastic casing scratched and yellowed with time. Emily cradled it in her hands like something sacred, or cursed. Sheriff Rosser arranged for a secure player to be brought in. They didn't risk using a public device or electronics connected to the network. Whatever was on that tape, they didn't want it leaking. They played it in a private room. The sheriff, Dr. Reyes, Officer Juno, and Emily gathered like listeners of a ghost story they weren't sure they wanted to hear. The tape clicked, hummed. Then a voice, not Emily's, not Zoe's, not Marcus's. A man's voice, calm, methodical, as if recording field notes. Whisper code numero 3. Subjects responding well to sound pattern C. Sleep disruption noted. Zoe remains defiant. Marcus, withdrawn. Emily, reactive. Sings under pressure. Good. A pause. The forest isolates. The dark clarifies. We erase the unnecessary. The tape crackled. Then, quietly, faintly, a girl's voice. "Please, please let us go. My mom's gonna come." Then the man again. "She always sings when she's scared. Birds do that too. You cage them, they sing." The tape stopped. Emily stood up slowly, her hands clenched. "That voice, that's him, the one we called the man with the mask." Sheriff Rosser exchanged a glance with Juno. Dr. Reyes whispered, "Emily, why did you call him that?" "Because that's all we saw," she said. "A white cloth, spiral drawn on it. He never shouted, never hit, just talked, taught us games, gave us rules." Rosser said, "What kind of games?" Emily didn't blink. "He'd take us to the tower." The fire lookout tower, they thought, had burned down in 1997, but old maps showed there had been 2 towers. The first, the one locals remembered, was closer to the main trail. But the second, the original, was deeper in the woods. Built in the 1960s, long since removed from public record. If it was still standing, it would be at least 4 miles into the eastern ridge. That territory was now overgrown, dangerous. but Emily insisted they go. "I need to see it," she said. "It'll help me remember." They left at dawn. Emily, Sheriff Rosser, Officer Juneau, and a quiet forest ranger named Callum Birch, who had access to the older maps. The hike was grueling, uphill, thick with vines, the path narrowed by time. As they walked, Emily started humming. It was faint, tuneless at first. Then it became clearer. A lullaby. "Go to sleep, the sky is falling. Hide the stars and stop the calling." Rosser stopped. "What's that?" Emily didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on a tree nearby. Etched into the bark, faded but visible, was the spiral. Below it, 3 stick figures, 2 small, 1 tall. Officer Juneau muttered, "We're close." 20 minutes later, they saw it. The second fire tower was still standing. Barely. Tall and skeletal, it rose like a ghost above the trees, its metal frame rusted, wooden planks missing from the steps. The top cabin was partly caved in, but it was there. Emily stepped forward like someone approaching an altar. "This is where he brought us," she said. "He told us to whisper to the wind, said it would carry our sins away." Rosser asked, "Did you ever try to escape?" Emily turned. "We weren't tied, we weren't locked, but we were conditioned. He taught us that outside was worse, that no one would come." She paused. But Zoe never believed it. Inside the base of the tower, they found what looked like a makeshift recording station. Old cables, a rusted reel-to-reel machine, dozens of decayed cassettes, and nailed to the inside of one beam, a photograph. 3 children. Emily recognized herself, younger, thinner. Beside her, Marcus and Zoe, smiling with terror in their eyes, and behind them, only partially visible, the figure in the white spiral mask. Rosser's breath caught. The photograph looked fresh, not 30 years old, maybe 5 years, maybe less. "This place wasn't abandoned in '97, she said. "Someone's kept it hidden. Someone's been maintaining it." On their way down, Callum Birch paused. "Wait." He bent near a stone, partially covered in moss. He brushed it aside. A tin box, rusted shut. Rosser opened it with her knife. Inside, dry, perfectly preserved, was a journal page. The ink was faded but legible. August 14, 1996. "He says Marcus is too weak. He wants to move him to the chamber. I begged him not to. He just tilted his head and whispered, 'Sometimes we let the bones sleep.' I'm scared. If anyone finds this, tell my sister I never stopped fighting. ZL." Emily fell to her knees. She wrote it. Zoe wrote it. She knew. Rosser stood. Her voice was quiet but firm. "We're not just dealing with a past crime. We're dealing with a pattern. And if Zoe left this here..." She looked back at the tower. Someone was meant to find it, and someone else didn't want them to. That night, back in town, the team processed the new evidence, but Emily didn't sleep. At 2:47 a.m., she walked to her window. There, across the street, standing just beyond the trees, was a tall figure. Still, watching. No face, just a white mask and a spiral. The following morning, the town of Elder Pines awoke to whispers, not from the wind through the trees, but from the people themselves. Someone had seen the spiral again. Emily's quiet return had already stirred up old wounds, half-healed traumas from 1996. But the masked figure standing outside her window? That was new and terrifying. The town's silence cracked open. Sheriff Rosser doubled security around Emily's temporary house. Officer Juneau was posted outside. Every deputy with a working flashlight was patrolling Elder Pines. But there were no footprints. No camera caught anything. No one confessed to playing a prank. Emily barely ate. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. "He never left," she whispered once. "He just changed his face." The town's history wasn't pristine. Hidden in the courthouse archives was a sealed folder marked Forest Surveillance Initiative, 1985 to 1993. Sheriff Rosser pulled strings to unseal it. Inside, contracts, aerial photos, field notes, all from a private research program once run in the mountains. A single name kept appearing in the margins: Dr. Malcolm Fenix. Rosser searched the name. Nothing. No license, no obituary, no trace, but one sheet in the file caught her eye. Foster grant pending, psychological study of adolescent resilience, location approved, Eastern Ridge Zone B, subject sourcing, volunteer. She read it again. Foster grant? Dr. Reyes leaned over. As in Emily Foster's father? Rosser paid a visit to Franklin Foster. Now in his 60s, Franklin was a reclusive man who lived just past the county line in an old ranch-style home surrounded by rusting machinery and wind chimes made of spoons. He answered the door slowly, thin, suspicious. "You're here about Emily," he said before Rosser could speak. "Why didn't you ever tell us about the Foster grant?" she asked. Franklin didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to a dusty bookshelf and pulled down a leather-bound journal. Flipping to the center, he handed her a page. "I didn't know what they were really doing. I thought it was a study on isolation, stress resilience. The funding was real. Government, maybe. But it changed. They told me Zoe and Marcus had agreed, that it was safe." He closed the journal. "But when they vanished, I knew they'd lied." "Who's they?" Rosser asked. Franklin hesitated, then said one name: Principal Wexler. Wexler had retired in 2003 and moved to a care home just an hour away. Dr. Reyes and Rosser drove out. The man they found was frail, his speech slow, but his eyes alert. When Rosser introduced herself and mentioned the Foster case, Wexler looked away. "I told them it was wrong," he murmured, "but they said it was for the future." "Who is they?" Rosser asked. Wexler didn't answer directly. Fenix came with ideas, promised us funding, science grants, attention, said our school could become a model for psychological advancement. He brought his own people, quiet men in gray coats. They weren't doctors, not really. He paused, his breathing shallow. One of them stayed. Rosser leaned in. "Who?" Wexler's voice cracked. "We called him the archivist." Back at the station, Emily was reviewing the photograph from the tower again, this time under a magnifying lens. Her hands trembled. There, barely visible behind her shoulder, a tattooed hand. A symbol, not of a spiral, but of a broken hourglass. She froze. "I saw that hand, again, just 2 weeks ago, on someone in this town." She turned to Juno. "I think one of them never left." Later that day, a tip came in. Someone had broken into the old school basement. The place had been sealed since 2001 after a flooding incident, but the padlock was freshly cut. When they entered, flashlight beams caught dust swirling like memories. Storage boxes, old desks, a chalkboard still faintly reading, "Welcome back, class of '96. At the back of the room, hidden behind a false wall, was a locked metal cabinet. Inside, 27 cassette tapes, 4 burned spiral masks, and a folder labeled Emily Foster, Observations, Weeks 1 to 10. Sheriff Rosser sat alone with the folder for hours. Each page was typed, detailed, noted her reactions to specific phrases, her fear thresholds, her humming patterns. There were even sketches of her face, her hands, her sleeping posture. These weren't notes from 30 years ago. They were dated last month. Meanwhile, Emily walked to the woods. She didn't tell anyone. Something in her gut drew her there. A sound, a feeling, or perhaps something left unfinished. Halfway through the path, she saw it, another spiral etched into the bark. Below it, this time, the initials, ZL, Zoe. She knelt. There, nestled beneath the roots of the tree, wrapped in plastic, was a cassette. She ran back. They played it that night, static, breathing. Then a girl's voice, trembling but clear. "If you find this, I'm not dead. I escaped. But he still watches. He never forgets. And the others, they help him. One's in town. You see the hourglass? Run." Emily dropped the headphones. Everything spun. They weren't alone, not even now. The search began before dawn. By flashlight and drone, the sheriff's department, fire crew, and volunteers combed the eastern ridge of Elder Pines, the one area Emily insisted they hadn't searched thoroughly in 1996. She carried the cassette in her coat pocket, Zoe's voice still echoing in her ears. He still watches. You see the hourglass? Run. They followed symbols carved in bark. Spirals at first, then hourglasses. Then something new. A bird with its beak open, sketched with chalk on fallen stones. It looked like it was singing. Sheriff Rosser recognized it first. A bird singing in silence. That's how Zoe used to sign her poetry. They pressed forward. Near the cliffside clearing, where old watchtowers once stood, the ground dipped unnaturally. Shovels hit the earth. The first object unearthed was a copper locket with 2 initials, ML, Marcus Laird. Next, bone fragments, shoe leather, part of a child's backpack strap, rotted but red. Then, something impossible. A glass jar. Inside it, tightly rolled, a map. Dated July 2nd, 1996, drawn by hand, labeled in blocky, childish writing. Safe paths, danger zones, don't go north. Emily stepped back. I made this, she whispered. As investigators cataloged the discovery, another voice crackled over the walkie-talkie. There's movement by the old hatch near the stream. Looks like someone's been living there. The unit converged. Under the moss and brush was a hatch door, rusted but recently oiled. Inside, a crawl space, blankets, cans of food, a camping lantern still warm, a radio tuned to static, and on the wall, a grid of photographs. Dozens, hundreds. Some dated within the last month, all taken from hidden forest cameras. Children, hikers, teens. One photo showed Emily, taken just 2 days after her return. They weren't hunting ghosts anymore. They were hunting a predator who had never left. DNA tests later confirmed it. The bones belonged to Marcus Laird and Zoe Lambert. The remains were partial but clear enough. Their parents, now grayed, fragile, were flown in privately. They cried, not with surprise, but with relief. The truth had taken decades, but it had finally come home. But the case didn't end there. A break came through the smallest detail. A bird feather found near the locket. Lab analysis confirmed it was from a spotted towhee, rare in this part of the country except in summer months. They had one nesting ground, near the abandoned ranger tower by Slate Cliff. When officers arrived, they found the tower's ladder freshly used. Inside the lookout room, journals filled with names, observations, tests, a cabinet labeled Subjects Ongoing, a bunk, food, clothes, and a single worn mask, painted with a broken hourglass. They also found blood, fresh. Whoever had lived there had left in a hurry. But not before recording something. The final cassette had no label, just static. Then, footsteps, breathing, and a voice, unmistakably male. They'll come now. They always come when the bones surface, but I'll be elsewhere. I'll keep watching. There are always new subjects, new nests. A click, silence, then birdsong, faint, melodic, a sound that would forever haunt Emily's dreams. Emily stood at the memorial site weeks later. The town had cleared the area near the fire tower and turned it into a protected preserve. A wooden bench overlooked the valley. A plaque read, "They were found, and they will be remembered." Dr. Reyes joined her quietly. "You know he's still out there," she said. Emily nodded. But now the world knows too, and the watching goes both ways. She pulled from her pocket a small wooden box. Inside was a cassette, the last one Zoe had recorded. She placed it beneath the soil near the bench. A farewell, a grave. As she turned to leave, a sound stopped her cold. A single bird call, from the trees beyond the clearing, sharp, high, and unmistakably familiar. Emily looked back, eyes narrowing. "You can hide," she whispered, "but you'll never be unseen again." She walked into the morning light, her red backpack slung over one shoulder, her steps steady. Behind her, in the thick woods, the birds fell silent.